the idea behind this is a requirement for us to complete our um, state municipal vulnerability preparedness uh, plan grant. And once we complete this, then we'll finalize the report, submit that to the state, and then we'll become an MVP community, which will make us eligible for grants. So this is the beginning of the process. One of the things that I wanted to point out is this is going to be a dynamic document. We do have a town master plan that a lot of us put a lot of time into that is being implemented. We'll also be coordinating with actions with the Department of Public Works, with Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and the Community Preservation Committee, and other groups in town. There we go. So we started in the process. We have a core team, and the core team includes me as the superintendent of public works, Dan Van Schalkwyk, who's the town engineer, Fire Chief Robert Pedrazi, he's the fire chief and the emergency management director, Deputy Chief of Police Brian Gill, Assistant Town Manager Carly Antonellis, Town Planner Mark Archambault, and the Conservation Administrator Joanne Christoph. So the agenda for the meeting, we're going to have, I'll talk a little bit about the MVP process and where we are, what we've done, an overview of the priority actions. We did a web survey, which was pretty successful, I think. We got a lot of good input. And then what's next? We have the potential for action grants to start implementing the plan. Some of the other actions that I think the town should do, and then have a lively discussion at the end. So the idea behind the MVP program is that the state realized that climate change is real. A lot of communities were already dealing with coastal storms and tornadoes and a lot of natural hazards and emergencies related to climate change, and that we needed to come up with each town needs to have a plan. So we have a set process that towns that become MVP communities follow. Some of it is our regional solutions, and if you were involved in the workshops, we had some regional planners there. We had people from Devon's, and we also have MRPC involved, and I know Groton, Shirley, and Harvard either have completed the process or in the same process we are. Littleton has done a plan, and we've done other pieces of this study in the past. The process is, so we did a kickoff with our core team, talked about what the process was, who was going to do what, how we were going to do it. And then we did 2 community resilience building workshops. They were each 4 hours. We, in the first workshop, characterized the hazards and identified community vulnerabilities and strengths. Then we identified and prioritized actions, and then determined the overall priority at the second one. That was all put together into a summary report. And so now we're presenting the summary report and getting some input, and then we'll finalize it. Down at the bottom here, I have the MVP principles. So it's a community-led process, and I know most of you were involved in it. We use a lot of existing information and efforts. As I mentioned, we have the town master plan and activities by other departments, and it says seek communities as local innovators, whatever that means. But anyway, so here's a picture of our one of our workshops. It's a format that is, as they say, anywhere at any scale, community-driven process. So it was really interesting. We got a lot of good input. We had a lot of people involved, a lot of new faces, and I think we came up with a pretty good plan. There is a website address here. I'll put this presentation on the town website. We do have a town website with some other information on it also. So the workshop, we developed what the hazards were, what the risks were, and then what our strengths and actions would be. And this was both a discussion, and then we did some voting with putting little stickers on the map and what those specific vulnerabilities were. And we basically identified the following vulnerabilities: extreme precipitation and flooding, heat and drought, severe storms and wind, snow and ice. What was interesting also was in the community survey, we had a couple other, you'll see that when I present the results, we had a couple other hazards that were identified. One was water contamination and pandemic. I wonder where that came from. So we looked at our strengths and our assets in the community. And again, you'll see how these were ranked in the survey, but regional transportation link is fairly unique. We're close to Route 495 and Route 2. We have a big rail presence in town. We have very good public safety programs, community facilities and institutions. We're proactive on our environmental policies and regulations. We've got a lot of open space and conservation land and engaged community. So based on the hazard analysis and the strengths and assets, we came up with some priority actions, and this was based on the voting that you saw in the CRB workshop. So stormwater and flood management was develop an integrated stormwater management resilience plan and identify opportunities for nature-based solutions. The second priority was protect open space, raise funds and acquire additional permanently protected conservation lands or conservation easements. And the Conservation Commission has already started undertaking that. They've set up a fund for purchasing open space as well as a priority list, and are fine-tuning a plan for that. And fire department vulnerability, as some of you may know, that the new fire department was built in the floodplain, and so we've done some short-term measures to try to fix that, but the problem's only going to get worse until we have a permanent solution. We also identified that Washington Street Groton Road is the access to the hospital, and it's a single road in and out, and there's some potential risks for that critical transportation link. One of the things that I've discovered as I've been involved in some of the other communities is that, these problems don't stop at the town borders. And so regional collaboration is really important. You can't have us solving a flooding problem when Groton is not solving the flooding problem and all their floodwaters are coming into air. So we really have to work together on these. Wildfire was identified as a potential natural hazard, and so we need to develop a wildfire response plan. We're in the process of doing a bylaw review to evaluate zoning, floodplain, and aquifer protection bylaws. You know, we're working on, we just completed a subdivision bylaw update, and Dan is working on a stormwater management bylaw. And then resource management, beaver management is a major issue in the community, as well as we're looking at doing a tree management study. Another idea that was brought up was an air quality study. As we mentioned, we're a transportation hub. We have a lot of truck traffic, heavy rail. The rail cars tend to sit and idle for long periods of time. And how is that affecting our air quality? Land use study, we do have some vulnerable areas in town, and Stony Brook area was identified. That's an industrial area, but there's also some sensitive ecological areas. It's also one of the sources of our, one of the town's main water supplies. Railroad coordination, we're, with all the rail traffic in town, we're vulnerable to some sort of a problem with a derailment, a fuel spill, or some other chemical spill related to the railroad, as well as there's issues with transportation. And so we need to maintain a good coordination with the railroads in town. And then what I think is really important is civic engagement. How do we keep people involved and interested in doing these things? A lot of the tasks that we've identified, we don't necessarily need to pay a lot of money and hire consultants to work on. We have a lot of concerned citizens that we can get involved. The more civic engagement we have, the easier it is to implement things. And so I think that's one of those things that we need to incorporate into all of our actions. So we did a community resilience building survey where we basically looked at the actions or the hazards, the vulnerabilities in the town, the strengths of the town, and the potential actions, and had people vote on them and provide input. And so we got a really good response. We had over 100 responses. So the first was, which of the following hazards pose the greatest threat to air? And you can see extreme storms and wind. That kind of relates also to snow and ice storms, extreme precipitation, flooding. All three of those sort of lumped together. Heat and drought. Pandemic wasn't even on the list, but that was a big write-in. And contaminated water was also a write-in. What do you consider air's greatest strengths as a community in combating the effects of natural hazards and climate change? Number one was geography and location. Number two, community involvement and support. Number three, municipal government structure. And I think that was primarily, they said the DPW was the strength there. Town infrastructure, and then other. What do you consider air's greatest vulnerabilities or challenges as a community related to the effects of natural hazards and climate change? You'll see some of these were strengths, and then other people thought they were weaknesses. But funding was definitely the one that got the most votes. Resources was second. Community demographics, community involvement and support, geography and location, and then other. And so the priority actions, we asked the respondents to select the top three plans that they felt the town should implement. And raise funds and acquire additional protected conservation land was the top rated. Develop an integrated stormwater management plan, including flood risk and culvert assessments. Conduct study of ponds and open water bodies townwide to develop a level control plan that helps protect, prevent flooding, as ponds drying out, as droughts occur. Develop land use management plan for the Stony Brook area. Develop programs and tools to increase civic engagement by community members. Work with MAPC to develop regional collaboration on resilience planning. To conduct air quality monitoring study, particularly in areas with heavy rail and trucking traffic. Evaluate zoning, floodplain, and aquifer protection bylaws. Improve communication with the railroads. Develop a vulnerability study of Groton Road for the access to the medical center. Climate vulnerability study and strategy for the fire station. Develop a comprehensive tree management plan. Develop a wildfire response plan, and develop a beaver management plan. Some of these things we're already in the process of doing. We have a design for some improvements at the fire station to protect it from flooding. We did that in anticipation of getting a FEMA grant at some time in the near future. The tree management plan, I talked with the state about grant funding, and they do have an urban tree grant program that we'll hopefully apply for in the fall. And some of these other things we can work with, like with MAPC. We can reach out to them and do some regional collaboration on different things. And some of these things have changed with our recent COVID-19 issues, where we have to realize that we do need more regional support for a lot of our town services. So we now, once we are completed the MVP planning study and become an MVP community, we're eligible for MVP action grants. This year's grant program, which was just released, they have grants between $25,000 and $2 million per project. There's a total of $10 million available. Last year, they gave out 52 grants under this program. A lot of them are planning assessments and regulatory updates. There's some really cool nature-based solutions, including stormwater management and river restorations, things like that. And then resilient redesigns and retrofits for critical facilities and infrastructure. We have a list of some of the projects that have been done in the past, and if people are interested in these, we can propose on the website, and they can see what types of projects are available. Outreach and engagement. We think this is really critical to making sure this program's a success. So we'll develop a plan for how we can do this. Some of the ideas that we had were to have a new resident orientation plan, which explains some of the things we're doing with climate change resiliency, how people can get involved, some of the issues in the community, and then just bringing this into all the projects that the town's doing. So what's next? Public listening session, what we're doing right now, that's the sort of the final step before we can finish our report, and we'll submit the report to the MVP program, and once that's approved, we'll be designated as an MVP community. We need to continue working on our priority actions and responsibilities and how we implement those, and maintain our MVP designation with reporting and coordination. There is an action grant request for responses out right now. What we're thinking is that we probably have a little bit too much on our plate. We haven't really got our act together for that, unless people have some ideas on something we do pretty simple. But one of the top priorities was looking at our stormwater master plan, and that's a fairly detailed project, and requires the town has to pay a share of the project, and so we need to appropriate money for that. But I think the other thing that would be next before we really start looking at action grants and what we're doing is to form a town climate action committee. So we have, right now we have an energy committee, we have a green community committee, we have a pond and dam committee. All three of those committees kind of meet when needed. We don't get a lot of action items out of them. So I think if we lump those together and had either a town climate action or town climate resiliency committee, and then we could have specific work groups within that committee that could deal with some of the specific energy, green community, and water resource issues. And so the first thing we would do is see who was interested in this, and then develop the mission of the committee and some of the goals of the committee. And so I've jotted down some ideas that I had. Advocate for the environmental well-being of the town residents, develop strategic planning focused on creating a more resilient community, implement effective townwide energy management, and leverage private sector and other groups to accomplish the goals and reduce the carbon footprint. And there's a picture of Sandy Pond. And we can take questions, or if people want, they can email me or call me, and I will stop the share and unmute. So we're at the point where if people have comments, questions, ideas, we'd love to talk about things.
Mark, this is Robert. First of all, I want to thank you for putting together this listening session, especially with these remote conditions that none of us would have expected a few months ago when you put together the two outstanding community sessions we had to put this together. So thank you and great job on that. And I know that you and I have discussed, as with some of the other department heads, that the town is committed and moving forward with the MVP designation. And I agree with you that I think we can consolidate some of our other committees, as you mentioned, the efforts of the Energy Committee, Green Communities, Pond and Dam, and others into a focused committee with working groups to move this forward. And I think that the two sessions you had, and I was at the second one, really did identify those points of vulnerability. And I think there's no question that the issue of pandemic, and you mentioned it earlier when we had the sessions, really wasn't on the forefront as it is now. And I think one of the things as we move forward, obviously the whole COVID-19 pandemic is a part of it, but we also don't want to lose focus of those other MVP areas that you identified: snow and ice, wind, heat and drought, and so forth, because those won't go away. So good job.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mark, I just had a question. Can you clarify the timing for grant application again? I missed some of that. Sorry.
I don't know if Hillary can fill us in on that.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's June 11th is the application due date.
Okay. And
Yeah,
that's
so
yearly.
we originally thought for this action grant that we would do a stormwater study, and Dan and I started looking at it and what was involved, and thinking that we're biting off quite a bit at this point, and so we may want to pick something that's a little less intensive and costly, and maybe doing some community outreach projects or some more additional, more detailed planning of some of these ideas. Something that's a little less intensive on the DPW, and so Anybody who has ideas, let us know, and we can start putting the application together. One of the issues is is Hillary still there?
It looks like she's calling back in. Maybe she got disconnected.
There is a town share, and I think Dan, is it 25%? Trevor, do you know?
Yeah, that's accurate. Yep.
Yeah. So if we're doing a $200,000 study, we have to come up with 50,000, which we don't have in our budget now. But if we're doing something that's less, we probably have some money somewhere that we could appropriate, or we just plan on doing it in 2021.
Yeah. One other thing to consider, I thought of this while you were presenting, Mark, is that if there are designs for the flood mitigation project at the fire station, I believe that would be maybe not for this round, but in the future that would be an eligible project for the MVP program, because it does fund both kind of capital as well as planning scopes of work. And I know, sort of FEMA funding can be, through the HMGP program can be hit or miss in terms of, when it's available and quite competitive. So something to keep in mind for the future, especially since you already have designs.
One of the other things that we've been pretty successful at in Ayer is leveraging different funding sources. So, for instance, when we did the project at Oak and Prospect Street, we got a CDBG grant through Alicia and her department, but then we used some of our Chapter 90 money and some of our water main rehab money to fund the rest of the project. So, and then because of that project, we rolled into getting a Complete Streets grant to do a sidewalk on School Street. So, so that's another thing we can look at as we start implementing these, is what other funding is available and how can we leverage that to get the most out of the project. Did anyone have comments on any of the other potential action items?
I didn't, no.
No. Pretty small type. I know, George, Conservation Commission has developed a list of priority properties to purchase, and it has a funding source now. Do you know what the balance is in the revolving fund?
It's a little over 500,000.
Oh, nice. So, and again, that's something we may be able to leverage some other funding sources for.
Yeah, I think, Mark, as you mentioned, I think that the Conservation Fund, and George is right, it has over just 500,000. That's one resource. You touched upon, which will be before the voters at town meeting in the budget, the tree management study that you want to do, which I think is important. And maybe from that study as well, there's some other aspects or projects that come from it. So I definitely agree with you that we do have a good track record of also whether it's through the Community Preservation Fund or other resources of leveraging against other grants and sources. And I think that would be a good exercise also for the MVP committee, let's call it, when it gets together to do some exercise and due diligence in identifying sources.
And one thing that we are doing, it's related to climate change, but we built our new water tank up on Pingree Hill, and they had to cut down a ton of trees to do that. And so I've got an Eagle Scout as his project is going to be planting 200 new trees up there.
Great.
So there's something. I think the trees cost me about $500, and we'll get a tremendous bang for our buck out of that, plus a new Eagle Scout in town.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
So stay tuned for when the tree planting day is.
One additional kind of note, just the town is, as part of its MVP planning grant, has these extended scope items that we're working on. One of which Mark mentioned, which is the bylaw and regulatory review. But the other piece is kind of an outreach and implementation plan, which we've submitted in kind of draft form. But I think it will be a nice roadmap for the MVP or Climate Action Committee to kind of hit the ground running with, kind of next steps for continuing to plan and implement many of the projects that were identified through the CRB process, including, providing kind of a range of potential state and federal and to some extent private funding sources.
All right, anything else? Well, like I said, feel free to, I'll put this on the town website. Feel free to invite all your friends to go on there and look at it. I think this is on the APAC, and I'm sure they'll do a replay of it. Riveting television. And,
It's live on Channel 8.
so, that's part of the whole thing is getting, we've got a lot of interested, talented people in town, and that's part of the whole thing is getting some energy behind these projects and having people get involved.
Totally.